Now Industry Academia plenary will commence. I am requesting Professor Pradip Datta, Professor, Department of Mechanical Engineering, IISc Bangalore, Professor Sudipto De from Mechanical Engineering Department, Jadavpur University, Mr. Dev Mukherjee from the Bengal Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Kolkata, Professor Rashid Benasser from University of Cergy Pontoise, France, Dr. Supriyo Sarkar from R&D Tata Steel Limited, Jamshedpur, India, Professor Mohsen Asadi from University of Stavanger, Norway, and Mr. Ajay Shankar, Distinguished Fellow, Director General's Office, the Energy and Resource Institute, TERI. Thank you, sir. I am requesting Professor Sudipto De to please continue this session.
Good morning to everybody. The idea of this particular Industry Academia inaugural plenary session, what you call it, that both the energy sector and the concept of sustainability, energy sector is in transition, no doubt, from the existing fossil fuel based systems. We have to transfer our energy system to renewable energy based due to several reasons. The first important part is they are not, their resource depletions will be, there will be no fossil fuels in future. And moreover, there are some other reasons all of you know. But this transition from the conventional fossil fuel based system, which has brought our entire system, entire society to this level of development, cannot be just fully replaced. So obviously there will be a transition. But during the transition, technology development is undoubtedly the most important aspect. But in addition to the technology development, the issues involved are how industry can also contribute to this technology development and adapt it to actually the real social application. And then obviously there are many issues which are subject-wise also interdisciplinary, from the domain knowledge up to the, going to the societal benefit level. So what we thought through this conference, if we can have certain idea, and in the participation also I know that there are the people from the both academics and industry, let's have some discussion on the issue, how the academic institution developing the knowledge and concept can be transferred to the actual social benefit through joint working of the industry and academia. And from this perspective, we have very distinguished speakers, both from the academics, one from India and from abroad. And similarly, from the industry perspective also, we have very distinguished panelists from both India and abroad, who have a lot of experience in this particular field. And our idea, the conduction of this particular panel will be in such way. Initially, I will request each of the distinguished panelists to talk around some 5 minutes plus, 5 to 10 minutes on what is their idea of rich experience, how this transition can be taken care of through the industry academia collaboration, and where are the key issues that should be addressed properly for this smooth transition. And then after the initial presentations of the issue, we will go to the actual open house discussion, where we expect that some of the feedback will come from you, because you are also experienced in several fields. So I start with the first expert who can just give his opinion, Professor Pradip Datta, who is the leader of the energy program of IISc Bangalore, the most premier institute of India. He can share his ideas how academic institution can collaborate to this particular social development issue, and what the academic people expect from the industry in the form of cooperation.
Thank you, Professor Sudipto. We are talking about industry-academia interaction or industry-academia collaboration. Whenever we talk about this subject, which is talked about many times over many different sessions, the basic question arises is, in any engagement between academia and industry, what is there to offer by the academic institution and what is to take? And similar question for mutual benefit, is by the industry. What can industry offer and what can industry take? In other words, what is a value proposition that each brings in whenever there is going to be any engagement? And typically, academia will offer something like, innovative ideas or dedicated studies for something, or out of the box thinking to explore a particular technology or a new technology and so on. And industry, of course, can offer resources and vast experiences and all. But those are very general things I'm talking about right now. But the bottom line for the industry is always a return on investment, because they believe in that and they cannot get away from that, of course, because it is not a charity organization. So if it puts in something, time or money or anything like that, it needs return, which means that that is the resource that is invested and the resource that, and the output that it gets out of it. So that is again for normal, collaboration between between academia and industry, for any technology development, for any type of engagement. But when it comes to energy, especially renewable energy, the question becomes a bit broader, because the return on investment may not be the only parameter to judge or evaluate whether a collaboration or whether the particular effort is worthwhile or not. Because any kind of technology development in renewable energy, there are other stakeholders, not just academia or the industry, other stakeholders, especially our society. Because to invest in the field of energy, we are taking resources. For instance, in the field of renewable energy, it requires a vast amount of land. Then it can also affect the environment. Then it also, something like any renewable energy, it requires a lot of material to be made. For instance, our photovoltaic, a lot of silicon material to be made. That also requires energy. So there is another parameter called energy return on energy invested, or EROI it is called, energy return on investment, which means that if I am putting in this much of energy for developing the materials and to manufacture, and then finally at the end of its life cycle, what is the energy that it is going to give me? Now if someone says that, okay, I will break even, that is, if the ratio is 1, then that is no good, because you are not getting any output, in fact, by investing some input. So what is that ratio going to be to make it meaningful? That is a question which can be answered not just by our engineers and technologists in academia or the industry, but also the social scientists come into the picture. And there are economists who have analyzed and have given a thumb rule that EROI, that is energy output versus divided by the energy input, and to make those materials, that has to be at least 7 or 8 to justify it. And today, sadly, in the case of solar, I think it is not much. It is not even to that. It is definitely more than 1, but much less than what is there. In the case of fossil fuel, it may be quite high, something like 30 or 40, but of course there are environmental issues. That is why it is not worthwhile. But in the case of wind, it may be about 15. In the case of hydro, it may be about 20 to 25, and so on. So these are the questions, and there are other questions also which come up, which are non-technical in nature, but very important, whether to decide or to make a policy towards a particular form of energy or not. And those kinds of questions are import. What should be import policy? For instance, in the case of solar, and I will elaborate that in my talk also, that today most of the deployment that is happening, 90% of the panels are being imported from China or Malaysia, in India I'm talking about. And the rest 10% is manufactured. If you look at the value addition, that may also not be more than 10 or 20% value addition. So ultimately, we are relying now whether, this kind of thing can be, analyzed and looked at. what is the job creation that is happening, because the society, after investing so much, it should not get only the energy, but also the associated, the spin-off effects also should come. So this kind of thing are important. So therefore, coming back to industry academia engagement, what we need to see is that the engagement should be not only with the technology or science people, but in the on the academia side, but also elaborately on the social science aspect, especially economics. Otherwise, the right kind of policies and the right selection of technology, both long-term as well as short-term policies, will not be possible easily. And because there are many decisions which we take today, the impact of this decision will be felt maybe many years back. I'll just finish it with one small example. Today we talk about automobiles and we need to go towards electric vehicles, right? And what we are not realizing is what is going to be the impact in the world after every vehicle becomes EV, like billions of vehicles. What is to be done with the batteries? Do we have the resources for it? Is it sustainable or not? Because the same kind of question came up more than 100 years back, maybe in the city of New York, when automobiles first came into the picture. People celebrated and they said that end of pollution means no more smelling horse dung on the road. We are getting cleaner vehicle. So this was what more than 100 years back, and today we know what the result is. So the policies are very much non-technical in nature, but both we have to join hands together, and that is how the industry academia collaboration should be, in my opinion, that aspect of it. Thank you.
Thanks to Professor Datta for introducing very important issues, no doubt. We need energy, but the introduction of renewable energy doesn't need for the need of energy. It's some sort of compulsion, and we have to voluntarily accept it in spite of a lot of difficulties. Then the important issue he has mentioned about the EROI and the LCA also. These two are very important because unless we do the life cycle analysis, we cannot just assess overall lifespan impact, environmental impact. And we should be all aware that the environmental impact doesn't come during the operation. It comes from the inception, that's from the cradle, after the final disposal of the plant, that's the grave. So obviously, from cradle to grave concept, the environmental impact has to be assessed fully, so that any system which is better environmental substitution or not, that's not that observing whether it is emitting during the operation or not. Then economics and social issues, as Professor Datta has mentioned, very important. There are many students also in this audience, I know. So during our student life, when we were engineering students, we all were just feeling why the economics and sociology you should study. But if you grow up in your future career, you will realize very important, because unless you understand the final socio-economic impact to any technological systems, doesn't have foolproof testing for whether it will be useful or not. That will be at the lab level only. So Professor Datta has rightly pointed out this. And policy, yes, we have one of the very senior administrative person, Mr. Shankar. I think he will give some idea about, because he has got a lot of experience in this particular area of how Government of India policy has helped in different issues, from the energy and the environment issues. Yes, it's a social problem, job creation. If we just substitute this, say for example in power plant, how many people were required, and if the renewable energy substitution can make it all automation and no job, then it can create a social. So obviously these are the challenging issues. We are not going to get all solutions here, but the problems has to be identified, and your feedback is very important after the individual presentations. And then several sectors, including together, they have to work, no doubt. It's a holistic approach. And as Professor Datta has rightly mentioned, that when you thought about that the horse-driven cart is replaced by automobiles and that's full solution, no. And always we're going through transition. The initial transition was through fossil fuel. Now we have to switch over to the next big transition. Let's see what the other experts say. So maybe in the we can just request one after another, Mr. Deve Mukherjee can be the industry panelist expert, who is the president designate of Bengal Chamber of Commerce and Industry. We are working together, and I can just vouch for him that he is very strong. He has got very strong propaganda in this area of industry academia collaboration, and we are working together in different international collaborations, including Professor Mohsen Asadi. So maybe we will just give a listen to Mr. Mukherjee now about his opinion, what possible areas of interactions of industry and academia.
Thank you very much, Professor De, for the opportunity to interact with all of you. At the outset, I would like to compliment Professor De and the organizers of this international conference, principally, chiefly because of two reasons. Firstly, the way the conference has been titled, and secondly, the timing of the conference. 2020 happens to be a very defining year, to my mind, and certainly the beginning of the decade that matters, that would matter, to reach the 2030 targets set by the global community. So this decade counts. As Professor De very generously and kindly introduced me, I represent the oldest chamber of commerce in this part of the world, and as part of the leadership team of Bengal Chamber, I would like to take the industry perspective and share with you my thoughts at a slightly broader level, broader perspective in this discourse. A responsible business in today's context does not look at shareholder value just in terms of financial returns. The value proposition which was rightly mentioned by Professor Dotto, I would like to elaborate a little bit more on that. And it is now an accepted fact that the shareholder value goes much beyond financial returns and considers social impact and environmental consideration very much as part of return on investment. That's the initial observation. Secondly, in fitness of things, both industry and academia, to my mind, share a symbiotic relationship. One necessarily should be dependent on the other. And academia plays or should play an important role in what the industry does and what the industry should do. The important observation is to look at the energy landscape and the huge transformational change that's happening on the energy landscape in the context of sustainable development. I compliment Professor De and the others for having structured the title of the conference as Energy and Sustainable Development. Because this energy transformation that's happening necessarily has to be seen in the context of sustainable development. And as we all know, and which was rightly also mentioned by the gentleman in the earlier session, the outcome or the main outcome of the Brundtland Commission on sustainable development, worth repeating for the benefit of all of us, that we need to be conscious that whatever initiative we take, whether it is in this case it is for energy, that what we do not only meets the needs of the present generation, but we do so without compromising the ability of the future generation to meet their needs. Now that puts a huge and onerous responsibility on the business community, and by extending the logic, the industry and academia, to work closely and look at energy in its holistic sense in the context of sustainable development, sustainability, and take a 360-degree view of energy and how this transition is happening without compromising on the environment, and being responsive to the social needs. Interestingly, we from the chamber, along with Jadavpur University and the Indian Institute of Technology, Kharagpur, and few other professors, have been working and trying to formulate a strategic initiative to take this industry-academia partnership and in the process take research to market in a meaningful and responsible manner. And this is an initiative which we have already kick-started, and I hope under the leadership of Professor Dey and others in the university, we will be able to take this initiative forward in a meaningful and beneficial manner. Couple of quick thoughts on where academia could help. Academia necessarily can help in a holistic sense, not just from technology perspective, but as Professor Dr. rightly said, from the social sciences, from the study of economics, political science, you name all the disciplines, you need to take a holistic view of what the drivers are, what the indicators should be in this energy transition process. And at the same time, the academia could be very helpful in coming up, designing a framework, and this is a food for thought for Professor Dey and the others, which could trigger some discussion, to create a framework for measuring what I would call adaptive resilience of a business. Today, sustainability goes beyond the traditional definition of sustainability because businesses have to be resilient and should be responsive to the changes that happen. And the changes come from all sides, and therefore the measuring the resilience and how adaptive is your business, this is where cross-cultural disciplines within an academia could help industry, and especially a responsible chamber of commerce, which I would like our chamber to be, to actually make it work. In order to do all this, what we need is a trust. There should not be a trust deficit between academia and industry, which often is the case. And that's why meaningful research, beneficial research, often makes a tardy progress towards making a meaningful contribution in the world of business. So let's close that gap and bring about a greater cooperation in taking the benefits and the inputs from academia for the benefit of the industry and the society at large. Sorry, I've exceeded my time.
No,
I hope I'm forgiven for that.
Absolutely right.
Thank you.
Yeah, in fact, I discussed in several occasions with Mr. Mukherjee because he's, I mean, he inspired me, he has inspired me specifically towards this particular direction and over several occasions. And whatever he has mentioned, the interesting part is obviously, you know, that the unknown area is there for this transition period. So what will happen will be evident after some 10 years target if we make it. But what to do right now, that has to be decided right now. So the 2020 to 2030, this particular, because 2030 we have got a defined international target to achieve. So let's see how much we can achieve, and obviously achievement cannot be done unless we have a specific plan for that achievement. So this is a very important year, obviously the starting of that particular activities. And also the issue he has mentioned that obviously we are symbiotic. If the academic institution cannot develop the knowledge that can be the technology rather for the applications, then industry cannot also run. And simultaneously, industry is going into that multiplication scale level, and where they make their, obviously their profit. That's the objective, and they has to do it because they can reinvestment into the further development of knowledge and technology. Yes, it's a symbiotic, no doubt, sir, I accept. And then responsible business definition. It's the people who from business, they should define, and he has rightly defined that the responsibility of the survival is the most critical issue. The business has to survive, so they have to make the profit and survival, no doubt. But undoubtedly, responsible business doesn't mean only survival, and that concept has come up now. Not only just having the business profit is the objective, and as being rather the chamber designate, president designate, he can just tell out that this should be the responsibility. We are inspired from academic institution. And obviously the sustainability, overall sustainability is the target. And then the initiative he has mentioned, I'm very happy that JU, IIT Kharagpur and the Bengal Chamber has already initiated one particular program, or rather the collaboration sort of thing, where we will try to carry out, and in fact Professor Shuman Chakraborty, of one of the very brilliant student of Jadavpur University Mechanical Department, we have all very strong regards and love for him. He will join actually. He is leading the IIT Kharagpur side, and Mr. Mukherjee and others are leading the chamber side. And the Jadavpur is also trying to have their, Jadavpur, IIT Kharagpur is trying to just go to the industry directly, whatever we can just contribute, and they let them see whether it is suitable for them or not. And out of that collaborations, we are trying to make many things directly from the lab to land, and we'll try. And we don't know how much it will be successful. And in fact, on 28th March, those who are interested, because our target is to just involve those people, we are going to display, many of the, the patent and the technology transfer in the two areas, rural technology and the low-cost healthcare. So we will display our innovations from Jadavpur and IIT Kharagpur, and then obviously a lot of industry people will be invited. If anybody is interested, you can join. This is a good forum to announce that. That will be in the open air theatre. And then we have the so-called academia role. Yes, it has to be 360 degree, and that is accepted. That means the term interdisciplinary, we are listening for a long time, but for real development, because no discipline nature has created. We have created the discipline for our own convenience, because the subject curriculum has to be classified according to discipline. But in any real life problem solutions, all are interdisciplinary in nature. If we have to do something really meaningful, maybe that contributed by different discipline, but finally it integrates into the complete useful thing that is interdisciplinary. And if it can be done from the very fundamental level of development, it's better. But obviously, it's a continuous process, and I think the people are aware with this. And the adaptive resilience of the business, yes, the business it was never, very easy thing, but now presently it is having even more greater challenge with respect to climate change and other issues, and it has to be adaptive. And adaptive resilience is the most important key word, as Mr. Mukherjee has identified rightly. And I think all of you, whatever in your mind, please put your questions, and then finally your interactions will be more meaningful during the outcome of this particular discussion. And we have to have mutual trust. If the industry and academy both blame each other, that doesn't lead to nowhere. And now, with respect to the Indian context after, we have two experts from academia, actually from Europe, one from Norway and another from France. Let us listen and let us learn something from their experience also. And I request next Professor Mohsen Asadi from University of Stavanger. He is more than 15 years we are in collaborations for different aspects. And I know that in Europe, they are very much responsive about the new energy transitions and the sustainability issues. And we are very eager to listen from his experience and his inputs to this particular development in India. You have your mic?
Hope so. Let's see. Maybe it works. Yep. Looks like that. Very well. Good morning, everyone. And first of all, thank to the organizers and especially my good friend Professor Dea for the invitation to come again to Kolkata. I have been here a couple of times and enjoy the being present here and collaboration with the Chamber of Commerce as well as the Jadavpur University and many others in this city. So it has been a very, let's say, productive collaboration between our team from Norway and the Kolkata team. The topic here, when it's about the energy and sustainable development, that is obviously one of the major issues today, and some people believe that we have already passed some kind of tipping point and everything is going to go, let's say, towards catastrophe. Some others think that it is still some time left, and some believe that there is no problem at all to be solved. We can continue as it is. So there are different opinions, and that is very important as well. So every individual needs to convince themselves about what opinion they will have about energy and sustainability. That is the first thing, as a member of the society. However, when we think about the society and the contribution of the universities, in terms of the educational organizations, as well as the industries, as the, let's say, actors in the society to, first of all, provide the job opportunities for and also development for the society. We definitely need to see that they are not separated from each other. They are two sides of the same coin in the end of the day. Why? It is first of all because of that the industries who are going to put forward new products, new solutions for helping the society to reach that level of, let's say, development that they can cover their needs in the first place in the best way, and also generating job opportunities for the member of the societies. However, the industries need competencies, people, young people, students who are educated and carrier of the knowledge which is necessary for that development. So in that relationship, there is obviously a necessity for aligning the questions in a way that what are the needs from the industrial side and what are the competencies from the university side that can be combined and delivered in the end of the day to support this development. So I don't see any conflict between those two groups or areas. So it is a natural thing, the collaboration between industry and academia. However, there might be some conflicting issues or difficulties there, because industries are more or less nowadays counting the cost and the benefit every 3 months. And given that they want to see the results yesterday already rather than tomorrow, and the universities and academia are a little bit more of slow changing things. It has a large mass, you know, that it is inertia there. So the inertia is a problem in a way that changing the direction might take certain time. And how this combination can be fruitful and beneficial for both sides, obviously both need to adjust themselves and adapt to these needs in a way. Industry need to have a little bit more longer perspectives, and the universities need to be a little bit more, let's say, faster in their changes and adaptation. So this is the challenges on both sides, and in the end of the day, the integration towards delivering a better quality of life for all members of the society is the interest of both sides. So because of that, the political framework to put together necessary rules and, let's say, setups to help the development, and the collaboration between industry to formulate what are their real needs, and the university to deliver it in terms of education and the people who are the carrier of this knowledge is an important element. And because of that, it should be, and it will be, a collaboration which is natural and which is necessary to further develop the society. So I do think that it is obvious that the collaboration should be structured better and supported better, and the initiatives mentioned here in terms of putting things in real work when it is about the collaboration between university and industry, and also the panel here and the participation of industrial partners, especially the Chamber of Commerce, which is the representative of the local industries, is a very important element, and I wish this collaboration the best of the success in the future. Thank you.
Thanks, Professor Mohsen Asadi. I know that he has a lot of experience in Europe of not only the academics but also transfer of technology from the lab to the actual practical use. And we are in collaborations, and I have learned many things from his experience. And what he has mentioned, out of which is obviously important part, is there is different perceptions in this transition, no doubt. Somebody is thinking that we can continue with this existing and we can be happy. But obviously major part of the world is thinking, no, we need to be, gear up for the future uncertainties. Job opportunities is not only a problem in India, it's a problem everywhere. So obviously for the new transition, we have to think of that unless we have sufficient job opportunity for the new transition, there will be social unrest. So obviously the renewable introduction must have to take care of, and listening from Professor Mohsen Asadi of European perspective also, that is true. And then that is mentioned by Professor Datta also for Indian context, very pertinent. And undoubtedly there is no conflict between industry and academia. That we can run together for mutual benefit. It's not neither that either side is losing. But important issue he has mentioned, that's very important, that obviously we have to have the time frame is a little bit different. That means industry has to be accountable and very fast responsive, otherwise they will not survive. In academic institution, we develop course curriculum, etc. Whatever we think of, that's rather a slow process, and we have to have certain amount of space and time, but industry has to make the solution. And so that sometimes industry have to make a stocked up solution and then followed by a long-term solution. They have to do it because they have to survive in the competition. So the time frame is an issue that both academia and industry must keep in mind for a successful collaboration. And then he has made it very rightly that the need of the industry, of industry has to define. And then academia, not necessarily they have to always follow that particular thing, but in applied science, unless it goes up to the social benefit, it doesn't make the at least full advantage. But obviously fundamental development will be useful in future for the applied cases also. But the important, I know that from our experience that during our collaboration, Europe is now on high demand of trained people in the area of renewable energy, from technology to the socio-economic issues. And as far as I remember, that at least 2 to 3 courses has been developed in the University of Stavanger, and there were some inputs into the course curriculum from our Jadavpur University part also. And in fact, I had a lecture session there, and I am very much impressed and happy that this adaptations of the new trained people development from the society, Europe is proactive. And maybe in future, we need the people from industry who has to make a transition from one type of energy sector to the another. Maybe it has to be required. So the people has to be trained in proper time and their industry has got a key role to play in the training issues. Okay, so rather I give it to the next expert, will be Mr. Rajay Shankar. He has got very, very rich experience in the Indian policy making process. So I hope that he will comment a very valuable input to this possible issue of Indian context and maybe international also, and he can give input, very valuable input to this context.
The theme of the conference is energy and sustainable development. And on both fronts, actually, mankind is at a very critical juncture. So this young Swedish girl has dominated the media. But really, time is running out as far as global warming is concerned. So the mainstream science says that if we do not change dramatically in the next few years, civilization as we know it may find it difficult to survive. So the last 6-7 months there have been some optimistic developments. UK and France have said that they will be carbon neutral, net carbon neutral by 2050. So there will be net carbon dioxide emissions. Now some experts would say that unless all of mankind achieves it by 2050 or even earlier, it may be too late. But at least they've said they will do it. As far as sustainability issue is concerned, it is again critical. It's not an immediate danger, but it is critical because the natural resources in the planet just do not permit the developing countries and people in the poorer countries like ours to have the lifestyles and the consumption that the richer countries have enjoyed for 50-60 years, and we all aspire towards it. So clearly, development where consumption levels in India and other poorer countries reaches that of the developed countries is just not possible. So sustainability will reach a breaking point maybe a few decades down the road, but it is vital today for the survival of the developed type of civilization that we are used to. So both themes are very critical for mankind and need to be center stage in thinking and in strategizing about the future. So the topic is very, very important. Now, other than industry and academia, there are two other players in the system, which would be government and civil society, which drive the forward movement or changes in countries and cultures. Now, in a more narrower sense, civil society becomes important because it is now increasingly setting the agenda of what should engage the attention of academia as well as industry. Or it's pushing industry towards social responsibility. So there's been some very interesting announcements in the last few months. Certain very large investment funds have said they will no longer put any money into fossil fuel industry. It's a huge change. So civil society is a major player and it's becoming a major player in India. And government is important because at the end of the day, the government is what allocates resources to academia, sets priorities and so on and so forth. And some of those priorities get set by what industry feels should be important, what civil society feels should be important. So in terms of energy and sustainability, I think the goal should be on how quickly can India also start a conversation on becoming net carbon neutral. Because our traditional position has been, we are a poor developing country, we need to increase per capita energy consumption 5 times, 10 times. This is a developed country problem. But I think the time has come when we should begin a serious conversation that we should become net carbon neutral. Can we become net carbon neutral? What are the implications? What are the costs? What are the narrower technology issues on which we need to do work or achieve breakthroughs? So that serious conversation needs to commence in this country. And it is best done in partnership between academia and industry. The other issue of sustainability, which is even more challenging, has acquired salience in Europe now. And the ideal goal or objective of sustainability would be that whatever we produce and consume, we should be able to recycle it and produce again and consume again. Now in the pre-industrial age that was happening. I mean, we ate out of leaves which were made into plates, so we drank out of clay, cups. But the industrial age changed all that. So the challenge now is how to get back to the circularity which existed prior to the industrial age. So we re-engineer products, we redesign products in a manner that if today what is recyclable or what goes into the circular economy is say 10%, we gradually keep pushing up to 70, 80, 90, 100%. It may be possible in some areas of engineering and production, may not be possible in other areas. But that discussion needs to start. Now, in India, there is another challenge, and that I think is a more important challenge, is that a lot of the technological solutions that have developed in the advanced countries need adjustment and adaptation for our needs. So the great business professor Prahlad, who made a great name for himself, was talking about the bottom of the pyramid. So if I come to India, a very simple example to drive home the point would be that we have villages in which we have a lot of cattle population, a lot of cow dung. Now globally, cattle are kept in large farms, so cow dung is all centrally generated in one large cattle farm and it gets used for developing clean energy. But in India, if we are to succeed, we need miniaturization. We need a small plant which would convert cow dung into clean energy and fertilizer. So how can we develop it? How do we work in partnership with industry and have it emerge as a commercial success in the market? Because with the Ujjwala program and the provision of free gas cylinders and cooking stoves, India would make the transition to use of clean cooking energy in the next few years. It's long overdue, we should do it. It will transform the quality of life of our women in the poorer households in the villages. But this cow dung, which we have the largest cattle population of the world, how do academia and industry work together to see that in this decade, 100% of the cow dung in this country is used for generating clean energy? It's an engineering problem, it's a miniaturization problem, it's a business model problem. Can we work together to achieve this breakthrough? I'm giving just one example, but examples like this can be multiplied. So if we are to think of energy and sustainability, I would urge and repeat, let us start the conversation of achieving net carbon neutrality along with UK and France and see whether we can do it. It's a high level ambition, maybe we can't do it, maybe we can't afford it, but let's have that conversation going and have an understanding of what it means. And the other is we begin the discussion on getting circularity in the economy so that we achieve the consumption levels and the comfort which people in Europe or USA have, but do it in a manner that everything is recyclable and sustainable. So these are two thoughts I'd like to leave with you. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Shankar, because he, with his very, very busy schedule, and obviously I am thankful to Mr. Mukherjee also because there is the arrangement. Yeah, industry academia is basically one collaboration which needs the government. I'm not telling the support directly, but the framework has to be also facilitated by the government. No doubt the government will play the third role, important role. And policy making through the government will actually make this possible more easily. And yeah, the carbon neutrality should be the target. There is no option. We have to have it somehow. And sustainability, as Mr. Shankar has rightly mentioned, that unless we have that particular plan, because this is not something that we will achieve and we will declare that we have achieved 100% sustainability. It's never possible. So what we have to do, we have to gear up our belt so that we can make that particular concept of sustainability as much as possible. And in this context, obviously, the rightly mentioned issue is basically the circular economy concept, where nothing is waste, everything is recyclable. We have to adopt that particular situation, because in linear process, something goes in and then finally waste goes to the environment. It can never be sustainable. So in nothing waste, everything can be recycled is the options for the sustainability. That is quite obvious theoretically, but we have to implement it practically also. And then with respect to the adaptations of the technology, that's a very important issue, because the climate change, the effect is local, but the cause is global. So obviously, whenever we are losing our Sundarban in West Bengal, the causes may be the international carbon emission. So obviously, with respect to that, the technology development also has to be in IPCC and the other United Nations discussions. IPCC goes on just telling the future possibility on scientific basis. But obviously, the United Nations has several rounds of meetings. All of you are aware with the Paris Agreement and other things, that the technology development need not to be for a country specific. If it is developed internationally, that has to be adapted for the local requirement, as Mr. Shankar has rightly mentioned. And then he has given a very specific case. But I just request you, for all the panelists has got many other things to say, if you make good questions at the end of this particular individual presentations. Yeah. So next speaker will be Professor Rashid Benazir. He has got his lot of experience from the, in this particular renewable energy transition situation, and he will talk on his experience and give some input to this particular discussion.
Thank you. Thank you for all my colleague and Professor Imadri for the invitation. It's the first time I visit Kolkata. So thanks again. I agree with all my colleagues, and I think all of us as citizens, we agree that, or we can feel that energy is main key of the sustainable. When I talk on France experience and some university, then some part could be, how we say, export or used as it is. We continue learning also for other countries, but it has to be adapted to the historical aspect, to the technical aspect and societal aspect. What I want to say is that if we see on energy, we were talking now between academia and industry. I would like to add a third part, which is citizen. Then to make it more complicated, I'll add the politician in the center, or political approach. The citizen, when I say citizen, it is our student, or an academic way. Because I'll come back again to the discussion, are we in phase between academia and industry, or we are in conflict? In conflict somehow. Not conflict, but to define the border. Where is the equilibrium? When I say the citizen or our student, they have to create the social constraint to make things changing. This is first things. And I insist on this way because in France we try to avoid to create student as product for industry. One of the main things could be responsible citizen, then fitting with the need of the industry. They can learn easily the techniques on industry, but industry has no responsibility to create this sensitive. When we create this citizen, he will be sensitive to the question as consumer and reducing the need of energy. He will work in the company and he will help eventually not to change the decision because it's not charity body. He has to make business and gain money. So this what we would like to mention, that academia prepare students to be as employer or workers, but also as citizens, because it will be the constraint for the society to change. So this is the first point we try to follow in Europe and so on. When we fulfill that, industry and academia, we are complementary, I agree, but in complementary there are always borders where define the complementary. It doesn't mean equality, it doesn't mean. So sometimes we have to answer, I agree, with the new change in technology, and when we talk about energy in reality, it could be energy or materials, they are equivalent. So this could be energy and materials in sustainability, because the main question is on part energy, but the other part is the outcome of energy. We are talking about the reduced CO2 and so on. You see that it's not talking just on the energy needs and as consuming energy, it's what we produce. So those equilibrium has to be defined. How it could be defined? It could be defined by one, as I said, the citizen or the employer or the student, who will request to be less consumers, which is completely a paradigm. If I am company, I will not be happy to have people who consume less energy. If I am EDF, or consume less. So there are some, they can consume better. This we could discuss. So when we have this kind of things, he can act as a social person to change the regulations. Then it's regulation with constraint and push for a change. As academia, we can be forced in proposing new solutions. But you know, to create new solution, we are all under constraint, and the colleague knows, on funds or how things running, we need clear program. And this program, it comes from central part in political way. I'll use a bad word, some use sometimes in France, more tempted to go on strike than elsewhere. It is stick and carrot. It's not a beautiful word. But I mean the regulation is the stick. It has to define the limit which we don't have to pass over. Then the mutation of the company or industry is somehow, they have no choice. But they say we need a carrot because we have to keep competitivity. And to keep competitivity, carrot is the help to go from A to B in not losing competitivity. I think this has to be the main things. How in Europe it works somehow on some project or on national aspect to make companies and university in symbiotic way. We have several programs where to get this money, which is equivalent of carrot, you need group or consortium between industry and university. So we don't atomize or distribute money on small aspect. We put it on pool, on local or the European project or some national project. This can make academia and industry collaborate in symbiotic way. When I say symbiotic way, it is on specific questions. And then this specific question which be valid in Europe or in France, it will be completely different in other countries. So sometimes in some other situation, I say our goal as academia, under some constraint, it has to be low tech, low cost, which is really the real, how we say, results on our society. And then it's defined. I mean, the optimum is just an optimum. Then to make it just between bracket, because I hear and I thank my colleague, in France we did a lot. I worked on thermal building and system integrating in thermal building and including renewable energy. In France, yeah, we have good results, but in reality we don't have to see the zero CO2 or something. We have to look on the gradient under the constraint, how things is going. What is the gradient? China, sometimes they are right. He say you went over a harsh time where you did all the bad things. I know. For this reason I say under constraint, it's just goal on a gradient, not another thing. Same thing, if my population is increasing, how can I reach this situation? I want to say just a joke. We have EDF with our nuclear power plant. I remember a long time ago, before the global warming or climate change, each one put the word he will prefer as industry, as lobby, and so on, or as green activities. EDF has a shame to make any advertising about nuclear energy. Then by the warm or by the climate change, EDF, in few years, the advertising was, we have the most green energy. Then it's somehow really surprising how we can pass. It is communication exercise, but you see how under constraint, something which was very bad, it became very good. We reach the goal, or able to reach the goal, because we can say 90% of our electricity is from nuclear power plant. So it's good to make it in relative. We are not so engaged also. We are engaged in thermal building and reducing the demand. In reality, we don't reduce the demand. We just put constraint that you have to produce what you are using on zero energy building. And we thank Europe for that, and several countries who are very active in this situation. In the beginning, I said that we have energy and materials. One of the problems for our citizen, I think, or student, is that when I want to feed myself, I see it. It is explicit things. And it is equivalent of energy. There are implicit energy and explicit energy. But when it is energy, no one feels it really. And I think one of good things is to have this sensitivity. When I say to people kilowatt hour, megawatt, and so on, subjective things. So either on the companies or the industry or on academia or on citizen, I think the goal could be also to fill these questions. When we are more aware about that, it goes. I'll finish, not be so talky, because some people think that Latin they are talky. Well, I would like to say that we are thinking all about renewable energy, I believe, but it will never fit completely with the goal. It's harsh to say it like that. Sometimes, you know, when you see people, we gain in quality of life, and we are asking others to not reach the same quality of life. This is the main. To have an idea, I don't remember exactly the goal, but the equivalent energy we are using for my quality of life, it's equivalent of 20 slaves, which is, I mean, unbelievable. And we know, but only renewable energy, we will not be able on this stage with this technology to reach that. So either we reduce our needs, or we have to invent new techniques, improve them, make it more efficiency to reach that. So just to see that the dilemma is on academical aspect, we need strong partnership with industry, because one it is our social invest, the other the allows employability and so on. We are not antagonists. This is good to say it. We are in symbiotic things, but the line which define our equilibrium and the goal where to go in mutation, we can propose it, but we need third part to make it possible. Thank you.
Yeah, yes. So, yeah, every expert is putting some new aspects, and I'm very happy that it is coming to a very wide perspective. And Professor Benazir has mentioned that issue that citizens' response is a very important issue. Unless the new things has been adopted or accepted wholeheartedly by the citizens, technology development and even the economic model, economic viability may not be acceptable. So obviously, citizen response is very important, and that's important for the demand side management also, because we know that the replacing the renewable energy, the conventional system by renewable energy systems, is energy will be available when it is available in nature only. It's not that when we demand. So we need to have simultaneously some of the adaptations to this new regime. And Professor Benazir has rightly mentioned to that issue. And with respect to industry policy, obviously the stick and carrot is the best possible option, because if we go on just punishing people for doing things, it never happens. And for the students also we know, and for society as a large. So an industry, it is very much important, I believe. And then the European model, we know all that the consortium model is very popular in Europe. And so they are attacking a particular problem, knowing very well that it cannot be solved by a single group or single person. They always make a consortium, and that in consortium, very evenly distribution, or rather the partnership between the industry and academia is a very common. We know that many of the problems are actually addressed in that way. And finally, the thermal solutions of buildings is one of the important interest area. Yeah, the thermal solution and energy efficient building issue is a very important issue in India also. That's a very relevant thing, and I think we can have also some very important input from Professor Benazir in the further discussions. So now the last expert panel is, we can consider him as one of the mentor of our conference also, because he is Dr. Subhash Sikdar, and he was involved in EPA. You are all aware that US Environmental Protection Agency, and he retired as the associate director, and a lot of experience in the area of environmental issues, and now he is working on the area of sustainability for over a long period. How many years he can mention, but I know that he is very famous in this area of environment and the sustainability issues, and he is the chief editor of, at least I know that I regularly in touch with Clean Technology and Environmental Policy, which is a very important journal for platform for the knowledge dissemination. So Dr. Sikdar, please.
Thank you, Professor Day, for inviting me to this conference as a plenary speaker tomorrow, and also as a participant in this consortium of learned people for discussion about sustainability and energy. While I am in condominium with all these experienced people, one thing is different from me from the others, is that they are all in practice. In other words, they are currently doing something, and I am retired for 4 years. So as you know, when you retire, things start to go downhill very quickly, and the mental faculty, memory, and lack of practice, and all of those things suffer, and very quickly you become a zombie unless you do something that keeps your gray cells somewhat active. Professor Day and many others, and I have been to several conferences in Europe as well as in India, they keep calling me professor. I tell them that I am not a professor. I have never been a professor. I have only taught at University of Colorado for 2 semesters as an adjunct, unpaid. But I have worked in industry for 10 years and 30 plus years in federal government. So I'm not a professor. Don't call me a professor, because I don't teach and I don't profess anything. So be that as it may, way I want to deal with this issue of sustainability and energy is that there are two different things. Sustainability is much broader issue than just concerns or issues of energy. And energy is a very, very difficult thing to understand, but that's very important, and it is probably the most important input into sustainability. So your conference is correctly focused, I would say. And having worked in the government, I'm somewhere in between industry and academia. From the academia, you can have propagandists for academia, you can have propagandists for industry, you can also be propagandists for the government, but the roles are very different. I have experienced both sides of the game. I mean, I have been in industry and I have been in academia a little bit, but in the government, so I know the specific roles very well. The government, as somebody was saying about the conflict between industry and academia, I don't see any conflict really, but there is essentially a conflict between the government and industry. Why? Because the government has armed forces and we can enforce, and nobody else can enforce. We pass laws, rules, regulations that must be obeyed, otherwise you face the armed forces. So therefore it's not an equal condominium here. It is very, very unequal. Therefore I would say that the government sponsored stuff you have to take with a grain of salt and with this little bit of suspicion, because the government, depending on the kind of government, the role of the government as defined by their citizens in the country, it could be various different things. See, since I come from United States, it is based on individual efforts and private enterprise. And government was supposed to be small, but it has become extremely big, and it is in everybody's business at this time, and it's creating a lot of different problems. Since I came from Environmental Protection Agency, I can tell you the government, once it becomes bigger and bigger, what happens is that individual agencies, and I was in this direct report to the president, but it is still an agency, it's not a department. And we pass, Congress passes laws, that's the system we have. Unless something has a legislative linkage, we cannot enforce anything. But when the laws come, these days it comes with a blank slate really. They have the boilerplate up front, but the details are not filled. So we have an extreme leverage in creating stuff that we want, and this is where the mischiefs can get in. And a lot of those have happened, and therefore when the regulations are done by the agencies, those regulations have the force of laws, even though they were not voted in by the Congress, and the citizens had no say in this thing. Therefore, there are some pitfalls in the policy making areas where we have to be careful about. What I see, the role of the industry, since I know the government and we know the conflict between us, we started this sustainable development movement, sort of a semi-government kind of movement that Gro Brundtland started. And as you heard, that there are people who are talking about calamity or catastrophe happening tomorrow, or 2050 you will all be gone. Just note 2050, everybody from in this bench would be gone by 2050, so we would have no responsibility for making predictions that may not come true. So sustainable development, and that has been a tremendous amount of global force, tour de force for all kinds of different activities. First, espousal of the ideas of sustainable development, of course, was some academia in the environmental economics, ecological economics, that sort of areas. Engineers, engineering departments, science departments came in very, very late, but industry came in much before academia. I do remember the industry started sustainable development and started employing vice presidents in charge of sustainable development. Now, if you look at all these multinational corporations, each one has an appointed vice president who has executive authority over shutting down projects or starting projects. So that sort of thing, industry started many, many years ago. And there is this World Council of Sustainable Development, and we have in the US also. They're very active. Academia came in late. Why? It's a very simple reason. Academia depends on the government for funding. Unless there is funding, there will be no PhD students or MS students, there will be no thesis, no publications, and professors would lose interest. And therefore, we started in the government, in EPA for instance, on National Science Foundation and Department of Energy, Department of Defense, all of those came trickling down one by one, but these are all recent things. Maybe no more than 20 years ago we started funding in this area of sustainable development, not in that moniker necessarily, but green chemistry you have heard, design for environment, pollution prevention, all of these things we have been funding, and that's how academia has been brought in. But I tend to make a difference between rhetoric and practice. I'm less interested in rhetoric these days, having gone through and heard for 30 years or so. I can tell you what industry does in practice. And all you have to do is to look up the websites of any of the large corporations, such as Shell, I see Imperial Chemical Industries, or Procter & Gamble, IBM, Boeing. You will see that they're looking at a few practical things to advance their bona fides on sustainable development. And these are important issues. This is not going to be fitting, what they do may not fit nicely into a well-knit theory that you can model and spew out all kinds of graphs or stuff like that. But five things five things industry look at reporting on. First is energy, which is the most important component of sustainable development. And what do they report? You look up the website, they report energy use reduction per unit of something. Energy use reduction is the number one. Then immediately following that, they would report CO2 emissions reductions. But these are related. You see, right now, most of the CO2 are coming from fossil fuels. So, and most of the energy industry use these days are also fossil fuels. So if you reduce fossil fuels, automatically CO2 would be reduced. But those are separately reported because CO2 is the enemy number one, so we must report it separately. Third is water use reduction, which is also very important because water is everywhere and indestructible, but clean water is not plentiful. One has to spend money to make it if one has to make it. So water use reduction is the third one. Fourth one would be materials use reduction. you want to make a particular product, you use a certain amount of raw materials, and you are very wasteful. You didn't really care about housekeeping, because whatever you can mix, sells. Therefore, there is no need to go back and redesign. But then there is this pressure of government regulations, emissions rules to abide by. So it is very imperative on the government side, on industry side, to reduce materials from in their reporting practices. And the last one is waste disposal. No matter what you do, we don't have circular economy yet, but there is always some waste to deal with. How much of waste are you reducing in production? Because the waste has to go someplace, and that has a cost associated with it. So all these 5 things you will find in the websites of the multinational corporations. The question is, this litany of 5 different activities prove that the companies are sustainable? I don't know what sustainability is or what sustainable means, because you can actually have all kinds of different definitions. But the question should be, whatever the definition is, are we moving towards something called sustainable, or are we receding from what is called sustainable? And if that is what we are looking at the change. And therefore, all these different reporting that industry does are qualifiers for sustainable development, because they are actually aiming to reduce waste, reduce usage of resources, including energy, and reduce making waste products. In totality, reporting these would not necessarily make sustainability, because we don't still know what it is. And to model that somehow, we have to become a little bit rhetorician or theoretician rather than practical. So therefore, I would say that what does an association of industry and academia ought to be doing for especially developing countries like the US, for India? I think the innovation has to be it. Somebody mentioned Prahlad, I suppose you did. He looks for opportunities of innovation in developing countries. Why? Simply because there are opportunities, but there is a much bigger reason, which is if the developing countries look up to the developed countries for technology transfer, that has a cost associated with it, and the cost probably would be too burdensome for developing countries. So there are all kinds of innovations possible here which could ultimately be transferred to the developed nations, because they would be damn cheap. This is the way to go. No other way I see for developing countries to bring them at par. Simply because, India, when I was growing up here, almost nobody had refrigerators. Very few people had cars. And all other amenities you have today, they were not there. So right now, a portion of India is living like at least pseudo first world citizens. The rest are living in a third world citizenship. So this sort of situation tells me that everybody wants to prosper in material terms. That is going to happen no matter what regulations or laws you pass. That's human instinct, human tendency. We like to do better than we are doing today. And to provide, to make that possible, the opportunities have to be provided without losing financial or other resources. And the only way I think India and other developing nations can come forward is going to be innovation. And this is where I think industry and academia can do wonders if they can effectively collaborate. Thank you.
So no doubt it's a very, very important input at the end. So obviously we have to look about the reduction of energy, CO2, material use reduction and waste disposal. These are the important issue. And direct conflict between the government and the industry is always there with respect to environmental context. Yes, whenever there is a better environmental protection measures, then that usually have an implications on the economy. So the economy of the product and service. So obviously that will have, but we have to adapt to that situations, referring to Mr. Deb Mukherjee, that we have to adapt to resilience of the industry too. And industry is much more faster in the response, has to be, because otherwise they will not survive. And academics take up that particular issue in later on or other follow, and subsequently they will develop the knowledge that will be useful for the industry also. And obviously the final statement by Dr. Sikdar is that obviously the innovations opportunity is tremendous in developing countries. So obviously, rather than depending on the development of the technology outside and bringing it to our country with adaptations that Mr. Shankar has also mentioned, but if we can develop our technology which is suited to our requirement, is the best possible option economically and overall. So I think rather than making much more comment, we can directly go to the open house session if anybody has any questions. Please, there are the mics in the audience, so if you can raise your hand, they can give it. Please introduce yourself in brief, and question must be very specific.
Sir, I am Gunjan Kumar, researcher at Jadavpur University. Very first, thank you for your for all this, each and every panelist for a very insight and grateful talk and knowledge to all of us. So my question is, any transition required a capacity building? And I want to bring one specific case here, like in the building segment only. In India, Energy Conservation Code is given in 2007. Now we are in 1920, so that means we have passed 13 years. The statistics is that after the passing of 13 years, only even a less than 10 state has in position to implement. Now coming to the West Bengal, code is about to revise and is yet to come. So now my question to the panelist is that here, how to build a capacity means for an institute, how we can plan for a training, manpower development, data analysis, benchmarking, and for an industry, how they are available for a data and the resource pool to visit their premises for a availability of their ongoing operation procedure in order to benchmark.
I think this should go to Mr. Shankar and Mr. Deb Mukherjee. Yeah, they can jointly answer this.
You were part of the policy making. You were in the power ministry, were you not?
I think you drawn attention to a very real world challenge, and this brings me to what I was trying to say in my remarks, that so much is driven by civil society and public opinion, and somehow we are not yet sufficiently developed in generating public opinion on the right causes. So if public opinion demanded energy efficient buildings, we'd get it. If public opinion demanded it without even codes, builders would advertise buildings saying that my energy bill, your energy bill or XT bill will be 20% lower if you buy my flat rather than my competitor's flat. That is not happening. So that's the challenge we have in academia, especially in academia, I believe, to seed ideas in civil society which can then grow and demand change. I have come from Delhi. Now to me it is inexplicable that air pollution in Delhi should be so bad and the people of Delhi are only now beginning to demand change. Because if they demanded change 5 years earlier, the party in power which has come back with a mandate would have spent energy and effort on air pollution, which they didn't do, because the people of Delhi were not demanding it. So I hope that answers you.
No, a very simple observation from my side. Any policy is as effective and can only be effective if that policy push dovetails with a bottom-up need. If the need is not there, the policy will not work. And to create that need for dovetailing the policy push, you need sensitization and behavioral response. So that initiative has to be taken up, and as Mr. Shankar rightly said, if the community and civil society get involved and invested and engaged in the process, then it automatically will reflect on the policymakers, and the policy would be in place and would be effective.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Anybody? Anyone, please raise your hand. The mic can go to the person, because we need to have very fast response. Yeah. Sir, be very specific.
Good morning, everybody. I am a bit shaky to speak to such august audience, but I would like to share my experience on this sustainability as an environmental auditor. I am retired head of the Department of Metallurgical Engineering from Bureau of Indian Standards, and I had been also an environmental auditor. So industry, I had a sort of the opportunity to interact with industry. So I find that there should be an interface between industry and academia and other stakeholders. And I think that standard is one of the means. So for environmental management, there is a standard, ISO 14001. So it forms the base how to interact between academia and other stakeholders and industry. Because once the standard is formulated by the collaboration of all experts from academia, industry and others, that auditor goes back to the industry and there is an interaction. In that way, this sort of sustainability that gets a boost. So that's what I wanted to say.
Thank you,
that
sir.
there should be more application of ISO, environment management standard, by the industry.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir, for your valuable input. Anybody else, any other queries? Please take the mic.
Good morning, sir. My specific question to Dr. Sikdar, sir. Sir, before few days, India has banned single-use plastics, but still in markets and very business organizations, still single-use plastics are being used. So, what steps may be taken so that there is an alternative source for the single-use plastics?
Well, first of all, what is the problem? Problem is people just throw waste plastics wherever they can find a space for it. And it ends up being primarily a nuisance. Ultimately, when they become microplastics in the ocean, perhaps other problems, long-term issues there are. But walking around in the city of Calcutta and elsewhere in India, I think that these plastics are making the cities filthy. They are ugly. But then what is the solution? The question therefore is fundamentally, what would be the substitute? And there was a case I want to bring to your attention. Sometime in the 1980s, I think, McDonald Corporation wanted to introduce clamshell plastic. This is polystyrene, clamshell for cheeseburger and Big Macs and stuff like that, replacing paper. And then there was some hue and cry, what are you doing, this is bad, blah, 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 blah. So McDonald was forced to do a life cycle assessment of these two different stuff. What amount of energy, materials are used to make equivalent amount of paper versus the polystyrene plastic, and what are the pollutions created because of that, what are the cost implications, etc. It turns out that plastic is way more cleaner than paper. But because of pressure from the environmentalists in the US, the publicity forced, bad publicity, forced McDonald's to reject the clamshells and go back to paper. Why paper is more wasteful? Because if you review the paper making process, you will know what kinds of ugly chemicals are used in making paper. So in the US, for instance, plastics are still used, but citizens don't throw them everywhere.
In fact, if I just supplement that, the neater solution is segregating the plastic and collecting it and disposing it off efficiently. But since we are unable to get waste disposal right, then we start thinking of extreme solutions, and we are unable to implement it because we don't have a substitute and the consumer is not willing to live without what he's got used to.
I mean, except Mr. Rajay Shankar, due to his very busy schedule from Delhi, and Mr. Dev Mukherjee, all of us will have in the keynote talk also. So I think if I know that there would have been some more questions, but during the keynote session also we can discuss those things. Otherwise the session will become a little bit interruptions. So I encouraged questions, and simultaneously I'm requesting all of you to have your discussions carried on during lunch also. So may I just have the request to all of you so that you can continue discussions in the lunch. So I hand over to the organizers, the next actions, formalities, or Professor Pradip Datta sessions, whatever you like.
So our industry academia, this session is over. We would like to thank all the participants here, the distinguished guests. So now we'll go to start our next technical session. That's the first technical session within next 5 minutes time. Thank you very much, sir. We'll go for the next session.